Hi, Melissa here for Condor, and we're doing our first ever movie review. Amazon reached out to us and asked us if we wanted to do a screening party for Tomorrow's War and gave us some codes. While this is not sponsored by Amazon, the video was provided to us by Amazon, and I just got finished watching Tomorrow's War. A lot of thoughts. So it's overall, the quick spoiler-free it's an 8 out of 10. I went into it really worried because we were not given this until the day before. I'm currently shooting this on July 1st. The movie comes out on July 2nd, so by the time you watch this, it will probably be July 2nd. But we watched it a day ahead, but in the evening. And that always kind of makes me worried about a film, because it kind of says to me that there's something wrong. Like, they don't want anybody reviewing it prior to it being released because they don't want any negative press. They know the negative press is going to come out when it gets released. It was a good movie, definitely a strong 8 out of 10. I would definitely recommend it to sci-fi fans to watch and to people who love science, because this movie crams in the science and why science is important. Really top-notch as far as the science goes. I don't know enough about science to be like, yes, all of this science is right on, but kind of one of the points of the movie is definitely showing that science is important for a lot of different reasons. When I watched it, I was just like, wow, this is a lot of science. Or a lot of science propaganda, maybe. It would be a better term for it. But like I said, I went into it thinking, oh, this is bad, because I haven't seen a lot of press on it. You know, I haven't seen anything saying, oh, the New York Sun says XYZ about Tomorrow's War. And that always makes me nervous. And then when I was watching the news today, they said that it was, it had been completed like a year ago and was supposed to come out like a year ago, and it didn't. Now, that makes me nervous as well, because during COVID, yeah, a lot of production stopped, but if it was intended to come out a year ago, and it's only coming out on Amazon for streaming, why didn't it come out a year ago for streaming? Because a lot of other places, Netflix included, were throwing whatever they had onto streaming because people needed something to watch. So the fact that they waited so long kind of had me nervous. My expectations were, despite the fact that they were low, I was given something really good. I really appreciated this movie. There were a couple of spots where I was just sort of like, are we still doing this? But overall, very good. Now, I'm gonna try to stay away from spoilers. And I didn't, like, if you could see my notes, I didn't do a whole lot of note writing towards the end of the movie, because I didn't want to do anything that was gonna spoil the movie in the end. If you don't want spoilers, quick 8 out of 10, definitely see it. It is worth at least one watch. I'm gonna say that I'm not likely to probably watch this movie again, just because it's sort of not my kind of movie. I like a good action adventure, I like a good science fiction, but there were aspects of this movie that I wouldn't do again. I have, for my own issue, this movie is very military heavy, and goes into a lot of subjects such as PTSD. And when I say that, it's not like the movie is about PTSD, but it does show PTSD from war and what PTSD from war is like, and sort of what it's like to come home from a military action, and what it is like for families of people who have to go into military action. And that is my own personal trauma, so I tend to stay away from those. That said, it is an excellent movie and it's an excellent science fiction, despite some of its flaws. So let's get sort of started. First of all, Chris Pratt's character, he plays a sort of down on his luck biology teacher or science teacher in high school. That's of his own sort of making. He definitely is trying for better positions and is not kind of getting there. But he does have a very loving family. His life just sort of, at least from his perspective, sort of sucks. He does have a wife that loves him. He has a daughter that is, oh, she's so adorable. And she clearly, like, loves him. And he, no matter what he says, she's going to be like, yes, that's the truth. And he teaches her about science, and she has a love of science, which I thought, again, science sort of propaganda throughout this movie. She definitely loves the science. Really quick premise is that people from the future come into the past and they're like, hey, in the future, we're losing this war against these aliens, and we need the help of people in the past. And so they start, bringing people from the past into the future to help them. And there is the shot when that first happens is they're watching, Chris Pratt's family has a bunch of people over and they're watching a football game. And in the middle of this football game, a giant rift opens up and all these soldiers come streaming out, and they're there to bring people from the past into the future. And it is, the way it's done is just, I've never seen anything like it in a movie. And I was like, yes, I really, really love what they did there. I would also say that scene is amazing. What comes after it is not. It is an exposition dump. I really believe in show don't tell, and they did so much showing of what that exposition dump is, that they didn't need to do it, because they later on they show it. They could have just jumped forward and been like, hey, the war's not going good even for the people of the past, and we are needing, to recruit civilians. They could have just said that. And instead they go into this big long dump, and it's not necessary. Especially since they kind of show other stuff later. But there's this scene where Chris Pratt is at his school and he's trying to teach these kids science, and none of the kids are even remotely interested because the war is going so bad. They're like, we're all gonna die anyway, so what's the point? And except for this one kid who is just crazy about volcanoes. And it was done in such a way that I was like, oh, volcanoes, that's a major thing, that's a plot point, that'll come up, it's, so that is kind of one of my problems with this movie, is there are things that get said or referenced, and it's done in such a way that it's telegraphed to you. You're like, oh, clearly volcanoes will be important. Clearly this guy has issues in his life with his family. That's a plot point. And that's even if I hadn't read the summary that Amazon had sent me. You know, so there's that. That kind of thing kind of always bothers me. Some stuff happens and Chris Pratt goes to see this guy. And in the course of talking to this guy, I turn to my roommate and I go, oh, this is his father. This is his estranged father. And he's like, yeah, I know. I guessed it as soon as he walked in. And I was like, oh, yeah, not great. One of the things that I did like was the people that they chose in the past to go into the future. I really liked how they did that, in that they chose people, they stated that people who did this were already dead. They had died before, at some point between where this movie has started and where the future people are, which is roughly 30 years into the future. So if I were to get called up, it means I have died somewhere in the next 10 years or the next 20 years or whatever. I have died. So I am not creating some sort of weird paradox by going into the future and like meeting myself or anything like that, which I thought was a really neat thing that I haven't really seen in time travel before. The future and the past are set 30 years, and so they're like two rafts on a river. They're always equally distance apart no matter what happens, which I thought was a really neat way of doing it. And they even sort of, like, somebody questions it and they sort of give an answer and then they skip over it, which I also really like, because it's sort of like, let's not focus on the time thing. This is like the premise, but it's not the, like, what you should be looking at, which I always really like when somebody's just like, nah, we're not going to talk about that. This is a rough understanding of how it is, but so I like that. The thing I kind of didn't like is when they go into sort of their boot camp, the past people go into the boot camp, preparing them to go into the future. They're not given what I would say is what they need to go into the future. They're not told exactly what they're hunting or what the aliens are. Somebody in the movie asks, like, why aren't you showing us what we're going to be shooting at? And they're like, oh, well, we don't do that because if we show you, you won't want to go. I'm just like, dude, you're the military and you've just conscripted these people. You can show them basically anything, they still have to go. Just do it, you know? Give them, you know, having worked with the military, having worked with things, you don't send people into war without giving them the information that they need, because that's just setting your soldiers up to fail. And, you know, I guess the future army just really needed this cannon fodder, but it rung sort of weird to me. I was like, why? You're already going to send these people. Just tell them, show them what they're up against. Tell them things like, you know, you need to shoot this part of the body. You need to do this thing. And they don't really do that. And I think that definitely sets them up for failure. So that's one of my issues with the movie. Then once they get to the future, it's like 10 minutes of Call of Duty. It is seriously like watching Call of Duty. Just the way they run around and all this other stuff, and it's just like, oh my god, I felt like I was watching a Call of Duty game, but with aliens instead of like soldiers. But I did appreciate the fact that, you know, they had done that. that they had made it look kind of realistic, or fairly realistic. I wasn't actually in the military, so I can't say, like, yes, that is very realistic, but I can say, like, it felt very real. One of the things I also kind of didn't like about it, but not like in any sort of major way, it was just sort of like, is Chris Pratt's character had been a soldier, and his father had been a soldier, and so he was already sort of predisposed to have good knowledge going into this. And I kind of feel like a lot of the people, they're only given something like 7 days of training before they get sent in, and that to me again speaks like, oh, this is just cannon fodder. Nobody expects you to come back. Even the people sending you there don't expect you to come back, because they're not giving you any sort of training. They're giving you very, very basic, very rudimentary stuff and being like, great, 7 days worth of training, there you go, go fight a hostile force, good luck. Overall, it doesn't affect sort of the movie, because it gets kind of, that's at that moment, and it serves the first part of the trip and stuff like that, but it doesn't serve anything going forward per se as far as Chris Pratt's storyline. It gets brought up with another guy named Charlie, who I love. I felt so bad for Charlie most of the way through the movie, because he's a scientist, and what he was going forward to do was to do science, but then something ended up happening and they couldn't use him. So he got turned into an infantry soldier, and I was just like, oh God, that sucks. It's so bad for Charlie. He just wants to do science, and he's also really into volcanoes. It's funny. Again, telegraphing volcanoes, it's important. They've been fighting this war for a while. I think they said 3 or 4 years. And I was kind of like, why don't these people have better guns? Like, why didn't the future develop better guns, in that time? Or why didn't they hand everybody grenades if the guns weren't cutting it? Like, seriously, like, why? Like, if you have to use explosives against the aliens, then give everybody grenades and teach them how to use grenades. I'd like to think that the world's governments, if given a hostile force like that, like what's shown in this movie, would have the sense to be like, this isn't working, let's do this, and let's, there's engineering as a science. If we're going to talk, this movie is all about science and why science is important. Engineering is a science, and it's also important. And engineering is how you get guns and grenades and bombs and stuff like that. So why weren't there engineers in the future, or even in the past? Why didn't they come into the past and say, hey, we need all the engineers to start making better weapons, and so that we have them in the future? Or why weren't the engineers in the past making better weapons? It was just kind of like, yes, the guns aren't working, try something new. That's just my gripe. When you get to the end, you find out a bunch of stuff, and one of the things that they point out is the reason that we sort of got these aliens is because the polar ice caps melted and depleted so much that they were able to come out of hibernation. And that again was, the science in this is kind of one of those things that just amazes me, because whoever wrote this said, oh, you know what, let's double down on the science, and let's make a bunch of this stuff about science. you know, the stuff that's really kind of fantasy, like time travel, let's skip over that. Let's, you know, give a explanation and then just skip over that. And then, but all the science stuff, let's ground that in reality, and let's really show, you know, the science and the science now and current issues and stuff like that. The war, the future war that they're all going to, is only 30 years into the future of our time. So, you know, when X starts is only, I think they said something like 2040 is when shit starts to go down, as opposed to, you know, we're in 2020 right now. So, like, think about that. 2021. But think about that. That's 20 years from now when shit starts to go down. Like, that's not like a lot of time. Conserve. So that we have polar ice caps and we don't get killed by aliens. Get my notes and they say, science to the rescue, because that is ultimately why Chris Pratt gets pulled into the future. I had a lot of questions about the aliens, and they sort of did get answered throughout, but at the same time they didn't, which I guess is kind of okay. It does, I don't want to say it's sequel baiting. The timeline that they give the aliens for existing kind of negates like a sequel, but at the same time they kind of like set it up like it could be a sequel, which I kind of really hope they don't, because this movie is perfect as a standalone movie. So my roommate watched this with me, and some of the stuff that he had an issue with, there were a couple of parts that he felt like sort of dragged. One of them was, there's a scene with Chris Pratt and the woman from the future who, they have this big long conversation on the beach, and it's about, you know, stuff that was done in the past that hadn't happened yet and stuff like that. Explains a lot. I don't think that there's another place that they could have done it. It's a character-driven thing in an otherwise sort of action-y movie. I don't know if I would have cut it. I don't know if there's a place I would have moved it to. But my roommate had a problem there. He said he kind of started to doze off in that area. And I can kind of see it, because there's only a couple of places during the bulk of the movie where they, like, just, it's all action, action, shoot, shoot, guns, aliens, blah. And then it's like, quiet, talk, character, bam, 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 aliens, aliens, aliens. And so it's sort of like a pacing thing, but I also don't know where you would have moved the scene to or changed it, but it is necessary. So it's kind of a weird, you know, kind of a thing. The thing that kind of came up was, one of the best parts was Charlie and the chainsaw. Won't tell you where that's at, but Charlie gets sort of some redemption and stuff like that with the chainsaw, and it was beautiful. Love Charlie. Love Charlie's character arc. He's a background character. He doesn't need more, so don't read this as something where I'm like, gee, I wish there was more Charlie, because I don't. But his character arc is just perfect for what they show of him. The other thing that sort of happened is Chris Pratt's father shows up at the end, and there's resolution with him and his father. And at one point, somebody talks about his father, and he calls him Conspiracy Santa. And I was like, yes, I need that on a t-shirt. I need a shirt that says Conspiracy Santa, because that was just the best line in the entire movie. So there's also a line up in the very, very front of the movie where Chris Pratt's wife says something to him, and she's like, nobody's eating my tuna Santa. And it's like a tuna salad sculpted like a Santa using grape tomatoes as like the outfit and the hat and stuff like that. It is almost sort of nauseating to look at. But it was funny that, you know, I can't think of anybody who would just sort of mound up tuna salad and, you know, decorate it to make it look like a Santa and expect people to eat it. Like I said at the beginning, it's an 8 out of 10. Very good. Lots of character, lots of science. The whole volcano thing from the beginning comes back at the end. There's, you know, and it's the way everything is sort of resolved is with science, which I really appreciate. It just makes for a really good sort of movie, or a good sort of difference in a movie, because most movies, you know, they would just be like, oh, based on this information we found this and then we did this and we shot the aliens or we exploded them. Think Independence Day, like the aliens come and how do the aliens die? Yeah, we use a computer virus. We used a computer virus so that we could blow them up. And I kind of like this better, where they're like, oh no, we use science to kill the animal, or to kill the aliens, which I thought was just so much better, and so much, I think, a lot more realistic. I think a lot of the stuff they showed was very well thought out, and I appreciated a lot of it. So that's my review of Tomorrow's War. I really do recommend everybody go watch it. You know, it's on Amazon Prime. Plug it into your TV and watch it full screen, because there's a lot that I really kind of wish that this had come out in theaters, because this would have been a really good theater movie. If you are watching this, I do recommend that you rent it and watch it, because it is so good. Even for all the flaws that I have just spent, you know, 20 minutes bitching about, it is a good movie. It is worth watching. It is for sure a big screen sort of movie. So if you have a big screen, watch it on a big screen. That's my vote. So thank you all for watching, and we hope to have more videos and more movie reviews coming up soon. And you all have a wonderful day.